In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to do a service on the gear set assembly on our new metal body grinder family. The tool that we're going to be using for this demonstration is an SCOS 1AX124. It is a cutoff tool, steel bodied, 1 horsepower, angle extended, 12,000 RPMs, 4 inch. On this particular tool, we've already removed the guard. So in order to service the gears, the first thing you're going to need to do is to loosen the extension assembly from the housing assembly. And there's a jam nut, and you can hold the jam nut and spin the housing, and everything should thread right off. Once these two pieces come apart, what you're going to want to do is take your housing assembly, your motor housing assembly, and set it aside. Then we'll take our angle head and clamp it inside the vise, leaving the flats visible so that you can use a wrench or an adjustable. There's some nice flats on the extension housing, and loosen the extension housing from the angle head. This is a left-handed thread, so this should thread right off. Once these two pieces come apart, you should be able to pull the pinion and shaft assembly right out of the housing. You can set your housing aside for right now. Remove your angle head and soft grips if you're using them from your vise. And to remove the pinion, typically you can have some tooling made. If you need something on the fly, we're just using a 9/16 inch wrench. We're going to tighten it down into a vise. And what you're going to want to do is slide this on the two flats that are located on the pinion gear. Then you can take a 5/32 Allen, and this is a left-handed thread, and you can twist these two things apart. Once you've got it loose, the pinion should thread right from the shaft, and you're able to remove this part. When you place your order, you'll receive a gear set, you'll receive this pinion, and also the output gear. To reassemble, what you're going to want to do is place some red Loctite onto the thread. And thread your pinion back on. Place this back in your fixture, and use your Allen wrench. Typically, in production, we torque this to 90 to 130 inch-pounds. And again, this is a left-handed thread. Alright, afterwards you can take that piece, put it back in your housing, your extension housing. It drops right in, and you can set that aside as we work on the output gear end. On the output gear end, you want to use your soft jaws, and again clamp your angle head with the output shaft facing up towards you, leaving enough room so that you can get in there to the bearing retainer, a little small threaded piece on the front underneath the output shaft. This piece has two small holes on the outside so that it can be removed using a spanner wrench with an 1/8 of an inch pin. And this is a right-handed thread. So once you get this loose, it should come thread right off. Once it's fully unthreaded, the piece may not come right out, as there's two bearings on the back end of the shaft. So you may need to reorient the angle head in your vise and tap softly on the retainer with a rubber hammer so that you don't distort the threads. It's very important we don't mess these threads up so that we can reuse these parts. So once your output shaft comes out, what we're going to want to do is remove the gear that's on the output shaft. Now, on some instances, you may have the bearing come out on the end of the output shaft, or it may retain itself inside the angle head. If the bearing comes out, you're going to want to remove the bearing. Just be as gentle as you can. You're going to press the bearing off the back of the shaft. Just slide something underneath it. On this particular one, the bearing stayed in the housing, so we're just going to need to remove the gears. To remove the gear, we have a gear fixture. We call it a gear puller that we've made. You can have something that slides underneath between the gear and the bearing. If you want to make something to slide between there, or if you have something, that'd be great. We're going to use something we had made in-house for this. So basically you'll need to take the clamp and clamp between the gear and the bearing. Or like I say, if you have something, just as long as something can slide on each side of the gear and the bearing, we're going to clamp on this and just press the shaft straight out. So we'll tighten this down in the vise. We'll use a punch and a hammer. You know, if you can use a punch that goes down inside the center drill on the top, that way it won't mushroom anything out, and just tap it until the two pieces come apart. Once apart, you can remove the gear, throw it aside, get your new gear. It will look exactly the same. And what you're going to do is repress the gear onto the shaft. So you may have an arbor press or a fixture made to do this with. If you don't, what you can do on the fly is we're going to be using a socket. And with this socket, we're just going to use it as our ram and repress this gear down with the parts in the vise, as so. What you want to do is make sure that your pinion bottoms on the top of the bearing. So you shouldn't see any space between the bottom of the pinion and the bearing. Alright, once these two pieces are pressed together, you can then, if needed, kind of follow the same routine. If you need to press the bearings back on the output shaft, if not, there should be two bearings up inside your angle head. And what we're going to want to do is reinsert the output shaft assembly into the angle head. You can use your soft jaws and reclamp on the angle head. And then use your spanner wrench to tighten back down the retainer. You may have to lightly tap the shaft to make sure your bearings and everything get seated correctly, and then use the spanner to tighten down. If it happens to tighten up on you while you're threading down the retainer, you may have to again give it a light tap on the top to help seat the bearing, and then continue with the assembly. Once this is threaded down, you should have visible about one thread on the top of it. Once this is completed, we're going to want to reassemble or reattach the angle head assembly to the extension housing assembly. Make sure your pinion is located in your housing, and the two pieces will thread back together. This is a left-handed thread, and they should just thread right up. Once you get them hand tight, you can place the angle head back in the vise. Use our wrench to tighten back down the housing, and get this really good, tight and snug. Okay. Once that's complete, you can take your extension assembly and place it back onto the motor housing assembly. As you insert, you may have to spin the spindle a little bit so that the spline on the output shaft, or on the extension shaft, aligns with the coupler that is on top of your motor. Once this is complete, you can hand tight the housing onto the shaft. When you get it there, you want to look at your orientation and see where it comes out, because there's nothing clocking the orientation on this. So if it's off to the side, you want to twist the angle head back so it's aligned up, the angle head to the lever. You can actually use this in any orientation you want if you prefer the lever to be somewhere else. We typically, as they ship out of here, they'll be oriented top of the angle head with the lever. Once oriented, you can place it back in your vise, and you can use 2 wrenches, and you want to tighten the lock nut towards the motor housing, the bottom housing, and you want to tighten your extension part in the opposite direction. So you tighten them against each other, and this will secure the assembly together. Once this is complete, you'll want to take your tool and check your RPMs and just make sure everything seems to be running correctly.